I landed in San Francisco. I was a part of a Y Combinator startup company. I got to see what the access of resources and capital looked like and what companies that scale that ride could feel like in feeling like you have an idea in your head that you're then able to make tangible and real in this world. And to be honest with you, it's an intoxicating feeling. And so I was exposed to that. I was grateful for it. I loved the team that I was working with. But at the same time, my fiance at the time had cancer and he ended up passing away. He, in his last 6 months of his life, had some of the most beautiful and provocative conversations that I had with him throughout a relationship of what he felt like he did that was worthwhile, what he felt like was a waste of time, what he wished he would have done differently. And I knew that at the end of my life, I would be asking the same questions of myself. And I didn't want to wait to ask them. I wanted to start asking them now while I still had that time to make a difference. And so the first thing that I needed to do was realizing, well, if I want to do something in these regions, in these markets with this commodity, I have to go learn. I have to start from first principles. I have to understand how it works. So I ended up quitting my job in San Francisco. I put all of my stuff in storage and I moved to Tanzania and I started working with coffee farmers and exporters in Tanzania.
Today, we are going even deeper than usual at the Founder Bible. This is Brianna's story, an impact entrepreneur who turned one of life's biggest tragedies into her most important gift. The chance to question everything and to become the type of founder that she truly aspired. I'm sure you're going to love this. Keep watching and let me know what you think in the comments. Wonderful. Well, good morning, Brianna. Welcome back to the audience, to the Founders Bible. You're in New York. It's just morning, we were saying. For me, it's kind of end of the day. How's it going today?
It's good, thank you. I have a cup of coffee here by my side, so I'm ready for this conversation and really looking forward to where we'll go.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, we had a chat. We were introduced by my wife. I have to say this on public because I've been, I keep interviewing male founders, even though I really want to like get the fullest perspective on all genders, on all backgrounds and all experiences. And she keeps saying like, you keep ending up always with men. It's like, come on, it's not true. And then it's like, oh, wait, probably it's actually true because it's always a little bit easier to get in this conversation, like kind of like buddy situation. But I'm really, really happy that you're here. I'm happy that you accepted this conversation. I know we're going to go into kind of like vulnerability territory. Your story is amazing. It's so inspiring. And I cannot wait to get the people to know a little bit about this. So let me break the ice. At the Founder Bible, I start with this first very simple question. Why are you a founder, right? What brought you to this painful and like kind of challenging lifestyle that how come did we end up here?
Well, I have two answers for you. I think first I'm going to explain a little bit about, I think, my philosophy of fulfillment, and then I'll explain how that feeds into how I started to curate this life of being a founder, which is, as you mentioned, a difficult journey and path to embark on, and one in which I don't think you really realize it until you start walking it, just how hard it is. So maybe a little bit of naivete built into that, but there is an idea. It's from Aristotle. It's called entelechy, and it is a natural principle that he has outlined, which is the fulfillment of potential, the actuation of potential. And the way in which he describes it is that every natural thing, every plant, if you will, the seed of a walnut tree holds the entire potential in it, in its very kernel and core. And I think that that is one of the things that has been truest to me, is this constant pursuit that almost feels like it is ingrained in my biology to want to become whatever it is that I can become. And I know that curiosity was embedded in me early in my childhood, and my parents, thank heavens, would feed that curiosity rather than suppress it. So I'm very grateful that I kind of grew up in that space of wanting to learn about the world around me, wanting to understand it, wanting to play in it and explore it. And I would say that that was fostered throughout my young adult life as well, but through just kind of happenstance in going to school, graduating, needing a job. I landed in San Francisco, and the availability of the job sector of what was available around me to fall into, if you will, was technology. And in Silicon Valley has prolific jobs available within startups. And so that same sort of insight around leaning into your curiosity and not being afraid of trying, failing, and seeing what you can do, seeing how far you can push your potential, is one of the city's cultivated value sets and virtues. And so I landed in San Francisco. I was a part of a Y Combinator startup company. I got to see what the access of resources and capital looked like, and what companies that scale that ride could feel like, and feeling like you have an idea in your head that you're then able to make tangible and real in this world. And to be honest with you, it's an intoxicating feeling. It's intoxicating to rally people around a belief system, or try and sell investors, despite the amount of no's that you have to grind through, to actually get people who see your vision and then want to build towards it. Your team, your customers, the community. And so I was exposed to that. I was grateful for it. I loved the team that I was working with. But at the same time, my fiance at the time had cancer, and he ended up passing away. He, in his last 6 months of his life, had some of the most beautiful and provocative conversations that I had with him throughout a relationship. We were together for 4 years, and I, in those last 6 months, got to know a man that in a completely different way, a man I didn't know throughout the rest of our relationship, because we really started to reflect on these existential questions, as one does at the end of your life, of what he felt like he did that was worthwhile, what he felt like was a waste of time, what he wished he would have done differently. And I knew that at the end of my life, I would be asking the same questions of myself. And I didn't want to wait to ask them. I wanted to start asking them now, while I still had that time to make a difference, to change my life, and to really intentionally design my life so at the end I would be able to confidently and with conviction say that I lived it in a way that I was proud of, or minimized the amount of regrets. Or, I mean, life is filled with compromise, but to, as much as I could, feel like I put everything on the table, and really pushed in and leaned into that belief that whatever it is that I could become, I would truly try to become that. And so, in reflecting with him, there were a few things that I realized. One was, uh, I loved, like I mentioned, the team that I was working with, but I lost this connection to a belief that I was making a difference in the world, having some sort of impact. And so I wanted to reconnect to something that had a little bit broader of a reach. We were just building technology for small, medium-sized businesses in the States, and there's nothing wrong with that by any means. But my heart had a desire to just want to
Yeah,
do
your
something that
potential was a little bit different.
it was a little bit more global. And so, one, I wanted to realign with that, reconnect with this desire to make a quote unquote impact, define what that even means, try and pick that apart and mull it over, which has been a career arc for me, if you will, trying to really understand how to even quantify that. But then the second part of it was to really think about, well, how do I push the boundaries of my potential? Where are they? How do you find them? And when you bump up against the edges, how do you learn in that friction to kind of push past beyond them? How elastic is that system? Um, and and becoming a founder felt like it did both of those. It pushed you in every possible way. I knew it would be a challenge. I knew it would be something that embarking on building something on my own would be the greatest litmus test of me being able to truly try and see what can I do with my raw potential and how can I actually um, throw it into the world in a way that at the end of my life I could say that was a ride, you know.
Wow, amazing. You know, the more that I speak with founders, and the more we kind of agree that for non religious people, being a founder, being an entrepreneur, the journey, the roller coaster is actually the fastest way to spirituality, right?
Mm,
It's so demanding. It pushes you to the extreme edges of your comfort zone. It pushes you, even
mhm,
kicks you out completely. Your story, wow. I mean, it's crazy in the sense that I love the fact that you're using this story as a gift. It must have
mm.
been terrifying and so painful, but at the same time, I'm so happy to hear that right now this is like, the gift left to for you to go to move forward. So guide me through a little bit the steps next. So you realize this, and first of all, for anyone that is not there yet, and oh god, we don't hope for anyone to be in a situation like yours to discover it, but you got this gift. For anyone that didn't get this gift in any other possible way, how could you, like, how did you even feel, how do you say, like motivated, like from, like, something is to say, yeah, I would love to do this, these are my dreams, these are my wishes, but something else is to really take the steps towards it and walk those talk, right? Guide me a little bit there.
Yeah, I think, you know, you hear a lot of people, whether it's a death in their family or whether it's in a personal encounter with, you know, a brush against their own mortality, the kind of reignition of realizing just how precious each day is and a passion and zest for life that I think doesn't have to only come from those situations. It's really salient when you get that as a prime example that the life is fragile and the reality of that kind of comes crashing through the window. But you don't need that to make these realizations or changes. As you mentioned, it's something where uh, a lot of people hit these moments in their life where they are interested in doing something different, making that change, stepping out, or reconnecting to something that they um, would either feel more passionate about or that they feel like they want to test and try. And I think for me, if I tried to actually um, reverse engineer this because I knew that I wanted to make an impact, but I didn't want it to just do something that would feel good because I knew feelings wouldn't last through the weather of the storm. Um, I wanted to try and quantify the impact that I would make, narrow down focus on the regions that I wanted to identify where I wanted to work, try and narrow scope on how my unique skills could contribute value there. So I can loop back around and share a little bit more on kind of specifics. But
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
in standing in these the questions that kind of spurred these thoughts inside of me was looking at there are, I think passion's a, a challenging word. It's it can be misleading, if you will, because if we say that we want to do something we're passionate about, I think there's a bidirectional feedback loop that you get with passion, where sometimes it is the curiosity and the action that then um, creates this wheel of passion that you expand into, rather than chasing after something that you find interesting and you say that's your passion. And I think it's this fine line between having action lead passion versus passion lead action. In my case, I wanted action to lead passion. I knew I had an interest, but I wanted to be very specific on the tactical approach that I would take. Because I did have question marks. It was uncertain. I didn't know quite where to begin. So I didn't quite trust my passion, if you will, to lead my action. So for wanting to be able to reconnect to something that I found interesting, or that I kind of grew up in, that I had lost connection in just landing in San Francisco. I grew up in a home that we did Habitat for Humanity, kind of, we did different service work around the world. And when I was 12 years old, took my first trip with my family to Tanzania and the Congo. And Tanzania, we worked at an orphanage and we just kind of volunteered, kind of worked around the classroom, English, etc. And in the Congo, we volunteered at a hospital. And uh, because of the family that I grew up in, a big heart of service, I saw value in wanting to do things in the world, contribute to the world. But I also saw deep flaws in the philanthropic model, where it didn't seem sustainable, where it felt like we were there just kind of as a placeholder and we weren't actually making any sort of sustainable change. We were just kind of placating a situation where it felt good to want to try and contribute, but we had zero skills to actually contribute. So in coming to really think about these things that as a child were really impressionable in my life, I wanted to then know that I wanted to loop back on the things that built the person that I was, that I found interesting, something global, something working across Africa, working across Latin America. We went on trips in Central America. And I wanted to do something that actually made a lasting change, building engines of economic development and growth. So, not just having some sort of temporary solution, but what does lasting change look like? As I was exposed to Y Combinator and the startup venture capital world of San Francisco, I saw that there's an entrepreneurial spirit that if you have access to certain capital, if you have access to resources, mentor to markets, it's this fuel on the tender of being able to ignite these businesses. What would those principles look like if we did that internationally? What are the types of businesses that could really thrive in these environments? And in looking at that, I realized the agricultural sector has something really unique and specific about these the regions that I found most interesting. One, the vast majority of the workforce is employed by agriculture across the regions emerging markets that I was interested in. And then two, in looking at the agricultural sector, if you were to look at specific types of commodities, if you were looking at specific type of economic activity that has the potential for really big growth, what are large investments that USAID, rest in peace, or Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Inter-American Development Bank, the World Bank, what type of initiatives do they fund? And how does that have impact? How does that actually build an entire systems thinking approach to change? Um, Coffee was the sector that I decided to start in because of the potential that it has in international markets. But that's really kind of where I started. I knew I had these early memories of something that was important to me. I saw flaws in the system. I wanted to bring my knowledge and my skills to address some of those flaws. And then I tried to narrow focus on, okay, where do I begin? And how do I start thinking about principles of market access, investment capital, small business growth within this very specific sector around the world?
Okay, let me make a quick break from the show to explain you why this project came alive. 6 months ago, I started interviewing founders to understand what were the secret sauces for their success. But even more importantly, I was curious to understand how much pain they had to go through in order to achieve their dreams. I've been an entrepreneur myself for the past 10 years, and I know exactly how painful this journey is, but very few people are actually willing to talk about it. And that's exactly what we're doing at the Founders Bible for Resilience. We're finally breaking the toxic hustle culture behind startup life. I'm on a mission to build a new generation of founders. Founders that can leverage ancient wisdom and science for true long term peak performance and longevity. If you want to be part of this movement, then check out wholegrainwisdom.com and join us now. Okay, now back to the show. I want to circle back a little bit on the, let's say, your personal situation in all of this journey, right? So it's been crazy hard. You got to this realization. I guess it took, as you explained, it took a while to get there. But then after you got to like the point where you said, okay, let's try to do this, then what happened in real terms, like in everyday life, and especially what have been like the key walls that you smash with your face, right? Because I guess
Yeah.
you talked about, the white people going to developing countries and
Yeah.
sending money and saying you should do this, you should do that. I guess it's not that easy. I know by my own experience. I keep listening to the people also involved in coffee. So what has been the story there?
Well, one thing I had to acknowledge from the get-go was that this was a new sector. I would be doing something that I knew eventually would have value, but I didn't know how to do it applied to these regions. And so I had to humble myself and realizing that I was starting from scratch. And so the first thing that I needed to do was realizing, well, if I want to do something in these regions, in these markets with this commodity, I have to go learn. I have to start from first principles. I have to understand how it works. So I ended up quitting my job in San Francisco. I put all of my stuff in storage and I moved to Tanzania and I started working with coffee farmers and exporters in Tanzania. And I, San Francisco is where the incredible coffee culture importing. And so I initially just started to ask as many people as I could, as many questions as I could, as much as I could get in front of people. Who can I talk to? Who can I connect to? Who's doing something cool that I can learn from? And I think when you take the posture of a student, it opens a lot of doors because people are typically a little bit more inclined to share their knowledge with you if you are genuinely receptive to hear it. What do you think will solve the problem in this industry? Where do you think the biggest pain point is? What's being ignored that you think a solution could add value to? And I think that that is the journey of a founder, is to ask questions, to understand the problem so we can build solutions for them. And so my curiosity, which was again started very early, looped back around to serve me really well in this chapter of a new adventure. Went from Tanzania, Colombia, Honduras, Panama, Costa Rica. I lived out of the United States for about 7 years, just moving from country to country, working from program to community to
And you were a
different
founder already
organization.
during that period, or you were working with certain entities or institutions?
I started off because I came from technology and that was the only skill I could add value. I started off as a consultant. How can I
Okay.
add technology to these businesses? Is it a data management system? Can I help upgrade or digitize this? And so I just started off saying, well, here are my skill sets. I want to come learn from you. Maybe we can like trade some sort of opportunity where I can come add some value while I'm also learning the way in which this market functions and the biggest needs and pain points, etc. And so added value where I could, learned the biggest gaps along the way, and then started to build a mental model of exactly where I think I could build something lasting or larger or how this works. And there's no silver bullet. I realized, like every market, it's complicated and there are a million problems. And so, once you answer one question, where do I begin? The next question is presented of, well, you could begin in 1,000 different directions. So sometimes you just have to start choosing and iterating on it.
How
And
did
that
you
was kind of
choose
the focus.
sorry, just to, because I'm curious on the specific point, a lot of funders have these like crazy mind, keep thinking about 1,000 billion things, so many features, so many different products, iterations. How did you know, okay, that's it, and I'm going to start from this one, and that's the only thing I'm going to do? Like from a mental
Honestly,
perspective, how were you sure about that?
um, I started off addressing the low hanging fruit.
Mhm.
As I started to build the model of what actually is happening, there's because there are a lot of challenges where you see the visible manifestations of the issues, but there's an underlying issue or problem that's creating the symptoms, and you're just seeing really the symptoms. You're seeing everything that you're kind of coming up in contact with, and the symptoms are the low hanging fruit. So you start to pick apart and then you just kind of trace them back until you start to understand what's underlying beneath it. What are the assumptions that are truly embedded in my belief about how the systems work? And then you use like a scientific method. You test a hypothesis, does it function? But to answer your question, as far as like where do you begin, there were a lot of things that I saw where in my mind, because of the skill sets that I had, the experience that I had in San Francisco, where I saw, oh, well, there's an easy solution for that. Like, oh, I could do that. Like, here's a completely different context, but yeah, I could build a tech solution for that. Or, oh, I already know
And
what
was
could
it that
solve
easy
this.
as
And
you expected?
well, nothing is ever as easy as it's expected. But for some of them, yes. I mean, this isn't. I started in a very antiquated system where digitization in an old industry is makes huge significant gains, and so sometimes going from spreadsheets into a data management system is it is an easy step, but has huge returns. And so,
Mhm.
or even just going from like paper to spreadsheet. So you see these small steps, and then just kind of build more sophisticated solutions along the way. So that was kind of how I progressed. The ones where I saw very clear ways to tackle them, I started there as I continued to learn and iterate on my model of, oh, actually, I think I understand something that I could build towards rather than just immediately address.
Sure, wonderful. Where are you now when it comes to like your vision plan, or like all of those questions that you ask yourself and you reflected at the beginning of this journey that you mentioned? Where are you now? Like, do you have a system to monitor somehow, like where you're going, what's the progress? Do you tick the bar, like the checks, and you say, oh, I've done this, I've done that? Or how, what's the mental process there?
Um, One of the hardest things, or most exciting things, depending on the way that you look at it, is that every answer brings a series of more questions that, as I start to see the way, as I zoom out and see the system, um, and gain a more sophisticated understanding of the way global markets work, commodities markets, international development, emerging market politics, institutional and infrastructure development. There's so many different angles at which I'm realizing you can look at this as well as influence the results. And so I have been trying to track it in um, one, the constant process of on a regular basis writing down what is my theory of the solution I am building towards. And initially, it's that low hanging fruit. Here's an easy solution to these problems. I start to then add, and here are the ways these problems engage with the system as a whole and how
Yes.
I modify my solution to address it. And it becomes, there's a term in technology, it's called cybernetics. It's the feedback loop in a system, in which case one thing it affects another, which then in turn, it's a systems thinking approach, but to very
Sure.
complex systems.
But
And that's the way our knowledge works.
how does that connect to your own personal potential, right? Like, how do you make sure, because doing this kind of work may or may not be necessarily any more aligned with who you are as a person, right? Or what's your personal belief system? How do you make sure that that's still aligned on that roadmap?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I think because I started this very journey with um, the questions that I tried to create as the infrastructure that I and the scaffolding that I built my ideas around. That scaffolding was, I don't want to do something that just feels good. I want to do something that has very specific quantifiable metrics around it. How do I know if I am actually on the right track with that original vision? And it is making a building engines of economic development and growth in emerging markets and making a quantifiable impact on the economic development of these regions. And so if I look at the KPIs, the indicators that I set for myself, even at the very beginning of this journey, that has been my North Star. How I've addressed it, how I've stacked solutions to build towards my idea of achieving that goal has changed over time. But I got very, 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 very clear as to what I was working towards and then built everything else kind of from there.
Do you feel that this system is kind of like shielding you from burning out, from mental health issues? Because at the beginning this
No.
conversation at the Thunder Bible, okay, like the reason why I ask is because I after 10 years, 11 years working in agri-tech, food tech, I got so many burnouts that I said, okay, wait a second, let me figure out if other people are facing the same issues and what's their secret sauce. So like, what's yours if you do have it? And like, somebody says, but if you have a great vision bigger than yourself, then you're kind of like protected, right? Is it so?
It's a double-edged sword, I think, a catch-22 problem where you can create that vision that is so grand that it calls you into this higher sense of a mission, but it can also completely consume you. And so I think
Mhm.
one of the things that along this path I've had to be really mindful of is that I have not lost myself to that vision that I am working towards. And remember that I am also on this journey, and that it's not kind of a martyr to the grander goal. Um, because as there's kind of two parts to the conversations that I had. His name is Kai, my late fiance. And it was one, the life that he lived, did he feel like it was worthwhile? What would he have done differently? And there was a lot of things that he mentioned about doing things that felt meaningful and impactful. But then there was a lot of that conversation that also centered um, around us, around relationships, around memories that he remembered that was sweet and that he held on to at the end. And I think if I lose sight of the fact that we are humans that are meant to connect and be in community. And I only focus on this grander goal that I am kind of building towards and lose sight of the fact that I need to nurture my soul along the way. Then burnout comes very quickly. And I've hit a number of walls. I've lived internationally. I've moved from country to country. Community is difficult to build in those senses. Doing it solo, and so I would say reminding myself that it's kind of the yin and the yang. Not that I think balance is a, a dirty word, and hustle and balance are kind of dirty words depending on the circles that you run in. And I've never been really good at creating balance in my life per se, but also knowing that I am included in my vision of my future is a really important distinction for me, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, totally. I think we definitely lose sight because I mean from you can see this situation from multiple lenses. You can see it from the psychological neuroscientific way, like the more that you get into kind of like hustle culture and burnout, and the more that you really don't realize how you are. So it's like kind of like a endless negative loop that brought you down into a spiral. And the opposite is true if you do it in another way. And then, like, I think also accepting that probably life is not just about working, or maybe life is not just about what somebody else told you about life. Is you're building your own reality as you go through life. Yeah,
Mm.
it's a hard process, definitely. How do you keep, like, what is your mental model and mindset model to be the best version of yourself every day? How do you keep the best version of yourself every day?
Um, that is a question that I am constantly trying to wrestle with, to even define that and know what that is. As I, started the conversation of knowing you or desiring, you're pushing up against the boundaries of what your potential is. Um, to know, am I trying as hard as I can? Am I as kind and patient as I can be? Am I putting in genuine effort, or am I, half-assing it? There are these questions that I need to practice intellectual honesty with myself, um, and that knowing how to calibrate yourself to reality is a difficult task. Um, and every year, I go through an annual review process, and I do try and redefine, what does this year look like for me? What are the things that I want to really try and lean into, whether that's on multiple dimensions. So the physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, vocationally, intellectually. I think I'm missing one.
Some
But
other
in
Lee, no
each,
worries.
another one. Um, and in each dimension, I think, well, what are the ways in which I want to show up for myself this year? And then I use that constantly to check back on, kind of similar to the way I keep the idea of what I'm building towards. I'm constantly refining that model of, I have the goal, but then I'm building these concepts that feed into knowing how the world is interacting with the markets that I'm trying to build towards that may affect my outcome. It's the same personally. I am constantly trying to check in with, if I do hit a wall, if I do fail, if I don't show up in the way I want to. What were the conditions? Did I not sleep? Was I cranky? What did I, was it an external factor? How do I kind of make sure that I am incorporating the learning and not just having it kind of brush off without the introspection and the reflection? Um, I tend to overthink things in life, though, so it's hard to just like live in your head constantly.
Welcome to the
So
club.
there's, you know, but that is, I would say that's the practice that I try and pursue. Um, Knowing, having very clear ideas of how I want to show up, making sure I review that on a regular basis, and then trying to stay very honest with myself when I don't, and why, and how to change that.
Amazing. To wrap it up, I want to ask one last question, which is going back to the initial point that you mentioned about Aristotle. By the way, I wanted to say, you know where did he get it from? That's important learning and teaching from the Buddha. I don't know if you were aware that
Yeah,
2,500 years
intelligent.
ago. Yeah, wonderful. Before the kind of Greek philosophy started like developing, a lot of like wisdom from the East arrived into the Mediterranean. And there are some people that say, he got it from the Buddha because he actually came a little bit before saying exactly the same thing. It's funny because
Could see that.
uh, yeah, the this concept of discovering, accepting, nurturing, unleashing your fullest potential. If you could recommend, if you can like suggest something to anyone that is still out there and figuring it out, how would you like kind of guide them to get there?
Hmm. This is maybe not, this is the first answer that's coming to mind. It might not be exactly what you're looking for, but I genuinely believe that we are the masters of our own self-delusion, and we can create or convince ourselves of any reality. We tell ourselves something is true, and we put it on repeat, and we start to believe it about ourselves or about the world, or we're constantly influenced by confirmation bias. Our brains are very interesting things. But knowing that and knowing how fallible it is, and the challenges that we face in being really uh, aware of what true truth is or true reality is, uh, we can actually, I think, hack some of these systems too. So just as we are in able to convince ourselves that oh, this will never work out, or oh, this is impossible, or oh, why would I even try? I think self talk is a really important piece to being a founder that can build the internal resilience that you need to keep going, because you will be able to convince yourself what your truth is. And that can be positive or negative. And I'm, not trying to say we all need to, you know, be victims of these grandiose thoughts and beliefs, because you can fly too close to the sun and be hubris in the same turn. um, but you have to be able to build the internal dialogue that will allow yourself to lean into the very discomfort that you are naturally wired to try and avoid. This is embarrassing. This doesn't feel good. This is ambiguous. This is scary. I don't know where I'm going. This hurts. That was, um, a dumb mistake, whatever it may be. Trying to train your brain to get back into whatever the question of, but I am a learner, or but I love what I'm doing, or but tomorrow's another day, whatever you may create that tape in your mind may be. But I encourage everyone to practice early and practice often, because it is hard. You'll hear a lot of no's. There will be a lot of roadblocks. You'll um, fall and get scraped up and bruised. And unless you have that internal conviction compass to remind yourself to keep going, then it's very easy to not. So that's my advice.
Wonderful. Yeah, consistency in the very small things, it's always the key. Absolutely. Thanks so much, Mariana. It's been really, really a pleasure. And to the next time.
Right. Thank you so much.